Why have we never been able to find the date of resurrection from the Bible? The current date of resurrection was enacted under the decree of the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, deciding the date on the first Sunday after the first moon following the spring equinox. The reason for the current date of Jesus' resurrection to be so obscure is because we have been unable to uncover it until now. In order to celebrate the true date of resurrection, we would need a specific date of resurrection proven from the Bible. However, since it is difficult to discern a specific date from the constant shifting of the equinox and full moon, we have been referencing different perspectives of each denomination to estimate the date of resurrection thus far. Those of Judaism strictly follow the dates of spring, as they require precise timing of their crops in preparation for celebrations, such as the first fruits or the Feast of Weeks. Thus, they abide by the lunar calendar. Because of this, Judaism used the spring equinox and the moon cycle to decide upon the dates of Passover, and in turn, the Church based its calculations upon the Jewish Passover. This causes the date of resurrection to be altered every year. As such, is it really impossible to find the date of resurrection within the Bible? In Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, it is written that Jesus Christ was sacrificed as the Passover lamb. Therefore, his death is connected with Passover. The first Passover began when Moses delivered the enslaved Hebrews out of Egypt. God instructed Moses to traditionalize the sacrifice of the Passover lamb through their children and grandchildren and celebrate it as the greatest Jewish feast. As the Passover lamb is a sacrifice for the Passover, Paul named Jesus Christ our Passover lamb. Upon the question of whether the death of Jesus Christ is related to Passover, on the night before Jesus was crucified, as a Jewish man, he was sharing a Passover meal with his disciples, and afterwards ascended unto Mount Olives to pray. His sweat was like the drops of blood. Upon finishing his prayer, Jesus was arrested by Roman soldiers, after which Peter denied Christ 3 times. That day, when Peter denied Christ 3 times, Christ was nailed to and died on the cross. These sequence of events occurred after the sacrifice of the Passover lamb. Therefore, if we determine the exact date of Passover, we can also find the day Christ gave himself for us on the cross. God chose the date of Passover and set the sacrifice of the Passover lamb as an antitype. God used this antitype to intertwine Passover with Christ's sacrifice to set the date of resurrection. If we look to the providence of God who orchestrated history, we can understand that the events of Christ's resurrection are connected with the date of Passover. In the Bible, Jesus proclaims that he will resurrect in 3 days. So we would need to add 3 days to the date of Passover to accurately set the date. In summary, the date of resurrection is the 3rd day from the date of Passover. Then, when exactly is Passover? According to the Bible, Jehovah's Passover is the 14th day of the first month. The first month could refer to the month of January. Therefore, the date of Passover could be perceived as January 14th. However, this first month is not the same as the first month of Eastern Asia's lunar calendar, nor the first month of the Julian calendar set from 46 BC, nor of the Gregorian calendar from 1582 AD. The first month can be found here in Exodus chapter 12, verse 1 through 2, when the Hebrews left Egypt, as it was declared as the beginning of the Hebrew month to replace the previous calendar. In the time of Moses, in the run-up to the final disaster in Exodus, God granted Passover in order to save the Hebrews. This is the origin of Passover. At the time, the Hebrews did not possess their own calendar, so God commanded, "This month shall be the beginning of months for you. It is to be the first month of the year to you." God used one of the months of the Egyptian calendar as the first month for the Hebrews, thus forming the Jewish calendar. In that era, the Egyptians used a very sophisticated solar calendar. The Egyptian calendar was so sophisticated, in fact, that when Julius Caesar, the emperor of Rome, witnessed the accuracy of the 365 days, Egyptian solar calendar, he abolished the current Roman calendar and established the Julian solar calendar with the aid of Egyptian scholars. Even the Gregorian calendar that we use today originated from the Julian calendar. In other words, the modern calendar originated from the Egyptian solar calendar. Therefore, when Passover first began, the first day of the Hebrew calendar coincided with that of the first solar calendar, and that the very first month of the first year of Hebrew calendar was aligned with the Egyptians. Following this, if we can identify the season of that first month in the Bible, we will also be able to find the date within the modern solar calendar. Doing so, we would be able to find out the date in the first solar calendar. At the time of Exodus, it was spring in Egypt. Before the 10th disaster through Moses, it was said that during the 7th disaster of hail, it was spring, for the barley had headed and the flax was in bloom. It should be early spring if the winter plant flax had bloomed. This suits the third month of the solar calendar. It is reasonable to say that the date of Passover is on the fourth month of the solar calendar. This is because after the 7th disaster of hail, there was the 8th disaster of locusts by the east wind, and the 9th disaster of complete darkness, which lasted for 3 days. In considering a realistic time schedule for 2 million Hebrews to be prepared for the 10th disaster, by the time the 10th disaster rolled over, it would have been the climax of springtime. The name April originates from aprile, which means the blossoming of every bud. So this was the time of full spring. Following this, the first Abib, the very beginning month of the Hebrew calendar, can be seen as the fourth month of the solar calendar. Thus, the first and only time the Passover date of the 14th of Abib, which was based on Egyptian solar calendar, aligned with the modern solar calendar, which is the 14th of April. This is the unchangeable date of Passover in the solar calendar. At last, we know that the date of Passover is April 14th in the solar calendar. So let's find out the date of crucifixion. On April 14th of Passover, Jesus and his disciples shared the Passover meal and prayed on Gethsemane until the Roman soldiers led him away. It was at this time when Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and afterwards the rooster crowed for the second time. The rooster's crowing meant that the night had passed, and that it was the new morning of the next day. So, the day after the Passover dinner was April 15th. On the same day of April 15th, 3 p.m., Jesus offered his spirit to God and took his last breath. Jesus resurrected on the third day, counting from the day of his death. On the early dawn of April 17th of the solar calendar, Jesus Christ broke the power of death and resurrected. Instead of relying on non-biblical sources, such as the lunar calendar and the spring equinox to celebrate the date of resurrection, let's celebrate the special day of our Lord on April 17th of the solar calendar, the true biblical date of resurrection. Here and now, from April 17th of 2023, if all Christians worldwide unite to celebrate the resurrection of our Lord and continue to do so on this day, our Lord would be very pleased.